My pleasure to announce next our keynote speaker for today, which is Mrs. Lakshmi. And she has 25 years professional experience in business and banking, and now is starting her second career, or also already right in her second career in development cooperation as CEO of the Center of Civil Society. Lakshmi, we're looking forward to your keynote speech.
Thank you, Yannick. Namaskar. A very good afternoon to all participants from Germany, Maldives, India, and the rest of the FNF South Asia network who are on this webinar today. It is indeed an honor to share my thoughts with such a diverse and talented group of individuals as we have with us today. Maldives has a special place in the heart of Indians, not just as a popular tourist destination, but also because of the evolutionary moorings that the two countries share from as far back as 300 BCE. Closer to the topic at hand, the women of Maldives have played a vital role in the social, economic, and political fabric of the Maldivian life. Historically, women have supported the advancement of Maldivian society in a number of arenas, from producing the thatch and rope used to construct early housing to raising the country's next generation. Not so long ago, before the economic shift towards tourism commenced, Maldivians were predominantly seafarers and fisherfolk. And while men spent days or even months away from their families, women stayed back and took the lead on tending to domestic matters. Today, I would like to touch upon two aspects in relation to the Maldivian women. The first pertains to liberty and freedom. The gender analysis by World Bank in 2016 found that Maldivian women are not particularly discriminated against in education, health, and survival. Maldives also has a UNDP General Inequality Index of 0.367, which sees it ranked 81 out of 162 countries, somewhere between the average for medium and high human development countries. The transformative socio-economic changes experienced by Maldives over the past few decades have significantly changed the Maldivian lifestyle and the division of gender roles within families and communities. Maldives is one of the few countries that has attained gender parity in primary and secondary education net enrollment and completion rates. Many gender egalitarian laws and affirmative action have been introduced recently to increase women's participation in the economy and public life. So, as a new democracy that has recently attained the status of a middle-income country, Maldives stands relatively higher in development indicators than many other countries in the region. However, as validated by the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap report in 2020, it falls significantly short of achieving the SDG Goal 3 of promoting gender equality and empowering women. As per internet sources, of the 77 seats in the Maldivian National Parliament, only 5 are held by women. Not only are women severely underrepresented in the government, there is lack of legislation targeting the interests of women, and I hope that our esteemed panelists can delve into the legislation against domestic violence too, which is an important positive step towards giving women in Maldives strength and agency. Some organizations are focusing on improving the capacities of both government and non-government bodies to advocate for and implement national and international instruments that aim to improve the status of women. However, the COVID pandemic has severely affected the tourism industry in Maldives, with the impacts being more profound on women than on men, as women largely work in the informal sector.
I'm in it now if you want to turn your video on.
Either as self-employed workers or as a contributing family worker. Women in the informal sector were working without formal contracts, a steady income stream, or employee benefits such as medical insurance or access to retirement schemes. The absence of such standard documentation makes it difficult for them to prove income loss even when applying for government assistance, and they do not have adequate financial or social security to help them weather the crisis. This needs advocacy and remedial legislations in order to strengthen political and civil freedoms and achieve true gender equality, equality in the true sense. The second aspect I want to touch upon is on climate change. Maldives was devastated by a tsunami in December 2004 following the Indian Ocean earthquake, with the total damage estimated at more than $400 million or 62% of GDP. Being the lowest lying country in the world, with more than 80% of country's land composed of coral islands, which rise less than 1 meter above the sea level, the Maldives are at high risk of being submerged due to rising sea levels. The IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has warned that at current rates, sea level rise would be high enough to make the Maldives uninhabitable by 2100. Given the historic relationship and contribution of Maldivian women to their natural environment, the race against climate change for protecting Maldives from extinction will benefit greatly from Maldivian women taking a leadership role. I'll conclude my address now, and I wish you all a well-engaged panel discussion and would like to thank FNF South Asia for convening this very important webinar. Namaskar.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for your keynote address. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, which is Raya Munawar. She has over a decade in experience in media industry, so is currently working as a freelancer and a person who has always out speaking for women in local media. Raya, the floor is yours, and I wish all of us a great discussion and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Yes, my name is Raya Munawar, and I'll be moderating your panel today. Just before we begin, I just wanted to introduce myself a little more. As you've been told, I'm first and foremost a journalist from the Maldives. For the last 10 years, I've been working in various segments of media, building newsrooms, reporting internationally, and teaching journalism across the archipelago. I'm a passionate advocate for the rights of journalists, especially where women are concerned, and for the environment as well. So now if we could just go to the topic. If you'd allow me, I'd like to brief our audience a little bit more about the discussion we're about to have. Today, our esteemed panel will walk us through the role of women in Maldivian society. We'll be exploring a little bit about the journey of how things used to be, what's happening now, and in which direction we think society is headed. A little more context for those of you who may not know. Our ancient Dravidian roots have ensured a strong tradition of matriarchy in the Maldives. Our history books record several sultanas in different atolls, as well as nationwide. For decades, our seafaring communities continue to inherit through females, and to this day, our women carry their own identities unattached from the names of husbands, for example. In fact, many observers have described the women of Maldives as being among the most emancipated in the Islamic world, as well as South Asia. Yet over the last decade, women's movements in the Maldives have steadily gained momentum as gender disparities and constraints in women's development have become more visible, especially between social classes and those living in urban versus more rural areas. Many of these initiatives are focused on creating awareness on women's health issues, improving access to justice, standing against gender-based violence, increasing political participation, elevating socioeconomic status, and so on. Just to give you kind of a light idea of where people feel or have felt an emergent need for investment and improvement. Today on our panel, we have a wonderful mix of ladies hailing from different backgrounds, but all very well versed on the subject. After all, like me, they are Maldivian women, born from Maldivian women, working and living in the Maldives. Most of our panelists have experience working in civil sector as well as many other areas, and I look forward to hearing their take on what it means to be a woman in our island nation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce first MP Jihan Mohammed. MP Jihan is the Parliament representative for the Hinavaru constituency and the current chair of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Human Rights, Child Protection and Gender. She played a pivotal role in drafting and ensuring the passage of now ratified Maldives anti-torture law through the parliament. Prior to her role as a lawmaker, she served at the Human Rights Commission of the Maldives as its commissioner, where she was responsible for torture monitoring and prevention, monitoring Maldives' adherence to international conventions, overseeing legal matters and policy development. Thanks to her many contributions in the field in 2017, she was appointed as a member of the fact-finding mission about the situation of Rohingya Muslims. She was also invited to join the board of the Association for the Prevention of Torture, an NGO based in Geneva, Switzerland. Our next panelist is Dr. Mariam Jabin. Dr. Mariam Jabin holds a doctorate in law, and her strong roots in academia have helped cement her status as a very well-respected name in legal education, human rights, access to justice, and organizational governance in the Maldives, all sectors that she's contributed to for over 18 years. In the past, she's held key government positions in the Maldives, including as Minister of State, in addition to serving on various national committees, such as the National Steering Committee on Human Rights Action Plan, Disability Council, Family Protection Authority, and the National De-Radicalization Committee. At present, she is the co-founder and the chairperson of the NGO called Equal Rights Initiative. In September 2019, she was appointed the first Secretary General of the Bar Council of the Maldives under the Legal Profession Act, where she still serves. Our third panelist is Ms. Yumna Rashid. Yumna Rashid is an entrepreneur and the founder of Gift Basket Maldives. During the early part of her career, she worked in different positions in the Maldivian government, United Nations, and World Bank projects. However, she reports having achieved true satisfaction after she ventured into the life of a female business owner. Yumna believes that being an entrepreneur helps her, one, acquire special management skills that help regenerate psychological and physical health. She credits her work as having helped cure her insomnia and encouraging her to think more positively. Apart from her role as a business person, she's also mom, wife, and daughter, balancing her personal and professional life and using entrepreneurship to support various needs has made her a very popular icon of inspiration in the Maldives. So if we could now go to the panel discussion. Panelists, I just want to remind you that you can answer any of the questions, but you're not required to provide answers unless directed. If you have anything to add, just let me know. So our first question is a pretty simple one. Personally, I've followed your public journeys for some time now, and I'm certain that there are many little Maldivian girls who see each one of you as a heroine whose story will help them find their own light and their own strength. Please share with us, who was the first role model that inspired you to pursue your dreams? Who would like to start? Perhaps we could start with Dr. Jabin.
Thank you, Rai, and thank you for that very lovely introduction. It's really an honor to be here amongst such esteemed Maldivian women who continue to serve the sector and who continue to be passionate for this subject. Going to that, I think that's a very difficult question, I must say, Rai, to say if there's a single person who has been a role model. And I can't really think of a single person who's been a role model for me. People who have passions beyond themselves, I think, inspired me throughout my life. People who work for a greater cause have inspired me and continue to inspire me today. And they can be not necessarily women, they can be older as well as younger people that we see in the Maldives today. Having said that, though, my biggest inspirations have been many of my teachers and professors, I must say, because they, being apart from mentors, has shown confidence in my abilities to achieve something beyond what I thought I could achieve. So I think from teachers and professors, I've taken certain inspirations to serve beyond something that, my profession, which is law primarily, is a very income or money oriented field, if I must say. And many people and many of my colleagues will be more fond of the litigation or the legal opinion or the more corporate aspect of lawyering. And I was, the community aspect of lawyering appealed to me more. So I think that serves as inspiration for me to serve something beyond what we are normally taught in schools.
Understood. It's a great answer. Ms. Yamna?
Hi, and it's a pleasure being here today. And I'm so excited to speak to the Maldivian ladies and our respective panelists, plus everyone who's joining in from Germany as well. Hi, my name is Yumna, and my role models have always been all the women out there who have been doing something at least to after studies or even after their jobs, or even when they have some free time at home, they do something. So they're not just like, they don't just have any free time, the Maldivian ladies, most of the time. So they are very creative. They have some very good plans in mind. And I think we are all very active here. So it's like a network of people here who has been inspiring each other. So that's like, and I've been working with a lot of international people from the UN and the World Bank. So most of my supervisors have been ladies. So I've really enjoyed working with them, and I've been traveling to the islands, to different parts of the world, and met so many of the leaders and everybody. So they really inspired me, and I've really learned a lot from them about the UN programs, how the women empowerment programs, the education programs. So I've been a part of it. Plus, when I had to sit back at home because I did not have a job, and also I was suffering from something that was really difficult for me at that time. I have insomnia, so it was really difficult for me to work as a normal person. And so that's why I did not have a choice in going into the work field. So I developed something that I thought will take my time, and I will not have to waste that time in doing nothing. So the gift basket Maldives is a way for me to communicate with the people who really loves getting something for their family members, who is something handmade, and I also get to do something that they really love to have. So that is how my role models have always been the people who really inspired me to do more, and they are the people who support me, and they will tell me, Yumna, you can do this, you can do this. So every woman out there who I've met have been my role models. So I'm really happy that my audiences have been really supportive of me.
That's a very sweet answer. Thank you. MPGN, please.
Thank you, Rai. Thank you, FNF South Asia and Women in Democracy, for this opportunity, and hello to everybody listening. Like two speakers before me, Jabin and Yumna, have said, this is a very tough question to answer, especially coming from and working in a field where, continuously working in fields where I have this honor and privilege to experience the life stories of women in some sort of struggle always. Women struggling to survive, women struggling to overcome their own personal lives, women struggling to overcome their life circumstances to provide for their families. So it's a very tough question to answer when I always taking back little bits of stories from all of these women that I've been meeting and been very lucky to meet. But since the question was, who was the first role model and first source of inspiration, I think it's very clear that I have to say predominantly my father, and then my mother. Why my father? Because from the moment I realized that I'm in a non-conventional family, I realized that it was because of him. because he was the first person, when I had my periods, he was the first person to talk to me about it and to tell me that it was nothing to be ashamed of. He would often go and buy sanitary napkins for me. He would take me with him. He would sometimes do it himself. So during Ramadan, when you find all the women busy in other households, I would see my father cooking with my mother. He kept pushing me into doing things outside of my school, things like he pushed me into trying out a diving course, a PADI diving course when I was 11 years old. He was pushing me into sports every day. He would say, you will not learn only in classroom, please join some sports, although I do not look very sporty now. He was continuously pushing me into something unconventional or the other, where I think unconsciously, I always was under the impression that there is nothing that is specific for me as a girl. And then there was my mother. While this is going on with this continuous inspiration and pushing was going on with my father, there's my mom who is working full-time, and she was working in a field where I didn't see many women in Maldives working at that time. She was from the aviation field. She was one of the first certified IATA women in the Maldives. Actually, in fact, she was the only one for quite some time, the only woman in her office handling computers and technology at a time when it was not very common to even have computers around. And crunching those numbers and making me develop a love for numbers and making maths easy. And so without realizing, I think it has been my home where the equation my parents have without the usual gender roles is, I think, it was very clear to me very early on that this is unconventional, but this also that also made me feel limitless.
Sounds like you had wonderful parents. So if I could just go to the next question. So as you know, I come from a media background, which is a field that's largely male-led in the Maldives. I've often told my newsroom that given that our role is to report on the human condition, equal representation of gender is absolutely crucial to ensuring balanced reporting and journalism. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how integral you believe that women are to your respective fields. I'm sure you have this experience, right? Perhaps we could start with Dr. Jabin, if that's all right.
Yeah, I think absolutely.
Yeah.
I think women are absolutely crucial to the field of law. When we think about the law and justice sector in the Maldives, from the perspective of a common person, do we think that our laws are biased? Do we think there's a gender bias? I think many of the professionals don't see this bias factor actually operating within our system. But we look at the parliament, we look at the judiciary, we look at the executive, we see very few, the number of shown in the video, it's just not significant enough for women to make an impact. I think one of the laws that we can look at is the family law in the Maldives. This piece of legislation is critical for women's, to ensure that women have the basic rights of society, which will empower them to pursue more rights, which will ensure that they are in a position or they have the capacity to, work towards other goals in life. If you look at the family law, this is a very gender-biased piece of legislation, if I may say, from the right to marry, the right to divorce, custody rights. It's quite biased. And since this law came into effect, which was in 2000 or 2001, if I remember correctly, there has not been significant effort in the country to actually address the issues women face because of this legislation and the regulations created under this piece of law. Why do we not attend to it when we know that women have a significant, human rights issue in this piece of, with the piece of legislation? I think that's because the number of women at the tables are just not significant enough. there has been a number of access to justice studies in the country which has shown that family court in the Maldives is a women's court. The number of cases at the civil court, at the criminal court, or at the drug court, if you look at these cases, you don't find many women there. But if you go to family court, this court, all the chairs will be occupied by women. So women have unresolved issues, unresolved needs that needs to be met by a system. And the system, in some way, there's a gap between the needs requirement and what we are trying to address or cater with the pieces of laws that we have. We've seen that there's a number of key pieces of legislation that we've had in the past. If you look at it, we have the Domestic Violence Prevention Act, we have a Sexual Offences Act, we have the Gender Equality Act. So in terms of laws, we've sort of created a lot of benchmarks that makes it at least look like we've achieved on paper. However, again, implementation is a big challenge and we're falling short of implementation. So who is there to implement these pieces of laws? Police officers, other officers at the executive branches, the number of women serving in these positions who are at the forefront, who is the first point of contact, for example, for a woman who's just been beaten up by his husband or, by another partner. And they give advice that, this is how it's supposed to be, and they send you back. I think this sensitization is not coming because of not, there are other factors in terms of capacity building, but I think it's also because we need to have women in these positions and women need to pursue these roles. We have many islands in the country where we don't have even a single female, policeman, and that's a problem. We have many situations in which, victim support units in agencies are actually advising women and saying things like, what were you wearing in case of a, alleged rape case. So I think I've just touched upon many huge topics, I think, where the role of women and the how integral it is for women to be in these positions. It's not a good enough, Rai, I think you'd agree, not enough room to discuss all of these topics, but I'll just stop there. Thank you.
I wish I could give you more time. MPG Hat, perhaps you'd like to add to it?
Sure. Thank you, Rai. Where do I begin in answering the question on how important the role of women is in Parliament? So let's start by looking at the three most significant functions of the Parliament. One is to legislate, the other is to budget, and the third one is to conduct oversight. I think it's an understatement if I go on to say that women are necessary to make sure and ensure that there's gender responsive lawmaking in any country. Let me just try to give some sort of context into what we have here in the Maldives. So we are 87 parliamentarians in the Maldives Parliament. And out of the 87, we are only four women here in the Parliament. And given that huge imbalance, that's 46% of the Parliament, which is a step back from where we were the last two tenures before this one. We were 5 women in the last 2 tenures, and now we are 4. Which means that whenever we're legislating, the number of people, parliamentarians voicing, talking about, questioning, analyzing from a gender lens is that many times less, 4.6%, only 4.6% in the Parliament, if you were to actually quantify it in number. Worse is how this function, how legislative functions is. So we have a piece of law presented to the Parliament, then we discuss it in the plenary, it is sent to a committee for research and analysis, there's a report, and then we endorse the report with the changes. So these reports come to committees. There are 17 standing committees and 4 female parliamentarians. That means there will be committees where there are no women in those standing committees, which means there will be several laws that are passed without the voice, the opinion, the perspective of women in the parliament. And even in those cases where we get to raise our voice, we have a say in every piece of legislation. It's a very muzzled voice. We are just either one or two in very lucky cases, such as my committee, on a maximum 2 female parliamentarians in a committee. So which means we are often struggling in this parliament and in this setting to have our voices heard, the women's perspective laid down on the table. And even harder is to convince all these men that certain issues are, going from one person to the other, one committee to the other, one group to the other, the lobbying and the extra work that we have to put in as women just to make sure that an issue is addressed in law. And we are legislating for not just one gender, but both the genders. So that is that. Budgeting. Okay, let's a very similar situation here as well. Not many people to ask whether we've budgeted for, put money for issues that are important to women, for health, for care, for breaking the stereotypes, to, like Dr. Jabin said, to implement the gender equality law. These questions are not adequately asked because we don't have enough women asking these questions. So it's absolutely integral for us to have more women asking these questions. Now, that's one angle of budget. The other angle is budget is often viewed as a very, because these are numbers, it's viewed as a very male thing. So we don't usually get the opportunity as women to, because many people don't believe that we can analyze, or it's a very gendered view of how women handle numbers. And so it's very difficult to have ourselves taken seriously when we talk about numbers or analysis or anything statistical. And then to conduct oversight. Like I just want to give you an example of it. It has been 2.5 years since we've in my committee, MP Rosena Adam has been repeatedly asking, what about a female rehab center? We have a rehabilitation center, but we don't have one for women. So we kept asking in reports, in follow-up meetings, and we've been doing that for 2.5 years. And MP Rosena Adam has been leading it, now female MP, just to make it very clear. And finally, on 13th of November, a few days from now, we're going to open our first female rehab center. And so I know from first-hand experience how asking and repeatedly holding institutions to account about women's issues can actually lead to effective remedies for women's issues. And for all this to happen, we need to have women here, and we are just not enough, 4.6 of us. Yeah.
On that fantastic note, I'll go to the next question. So this is a heavy one, and I've split it into 2 parts. So it's the same question, but we'll first look at it from a political perspective. So there will be some points that you've already touched on, and then we will look at it from an economic point of view. But the query remains the same. Are we all good with that? Yes.
Sure.
Moving forward, so the question is, what kind of progress, or as the case may be, regress, have you observed over the last couple of years following the rising participation of women? Well, limited participation maybe still, but rising. If you could first answer it from a political point of view, looking at the numbers of women in civil life, because of her expertise in the area, I'd like to begin with MP Jia.
Thank you. Looking at let's start with the global gender gap index. Let's start with facts. So in the beginning, the keynote speaker, Ms. Lakshmi, did point out that we are at a 0.6 for global gender gap index, index which looks good. But if you look at the SDG goals, the goal that we have not been able to attain is one on gender equality. Okay, let's split that one into where we are with the 4 aspects of gender equality that is used to measure the index. So with economic participation, we're at 0.49. We're not doing too great, not too bad. Political participation, we're at 0.1, which is awful, terrible. With health, we've almost attained the goal, 0.96. And with education, we are at 1, which means we've attained the goal. With gender equality, education and health goals being attained, when you see economic and political participation suffering far away from it, you know that in the middle lies a very big problem with the gap, of course. So you start dissecting and asking why do we continue to experience this gender gap? Looking at leadership, like I said, Majlis, we are at 4.6% women representation. Magistrates and judges, although in the past 3 to 4 years, there has been a 200% increase in the representation of women in courts. Although it's 200%, it's, you know, we're reaching this from a negligent point. So it's 11%. 11% overall, but this is a huge jump for us from where we were. Managerial posts, we are at 22.3%. This is despite the fact that in civil service or in education sector, you see more women educated in the higher secondary and tertiary levels of education. So what is really happening is there are structural barriers such as gender roles, childcare support, lack of childcare support, state provided or otherwise, or supported or otherwise, and also family support for women to attain these high positions where they get to make decisions. And also finally in the Maldives, we're experiencing, as other panelists would agree, the effect of extremism on perceptions around what girls can do, the role of women, and what women should be doing, and where they should be represented or where they should be working. And so this is definitely something we need to worry about, even with statistics showing that more women are paid in unpaid household work than men, actually, in fact, 15% more than men. That's also very concerning. Local councils, where we're just for the first time seeing something hopeful because of special measures we've put in the law. As a result, we've seen an increase into 39.5% of women represented in local governance. And so it is through special measures only that we can bridge this gap. And so politically speaking, political parties need to encourage women into engagement in political sphere, in leadership roles, not in managerial and clerical roles, as we see now. And also the state as a whole need to put in some special measures to build this gap.
Would any of the ladies have anything else to add? Yes, Yamna, please.
Yes, I would like to add also, I have noticed that in Maldives is a country where we always depend on imported goods and services when it comes to decorating a baby's room, or even when we want to gift someone something special. So we always prefer buying from shops, or we order online. So when I came into this business, I had very little confidence that my work will be sold in the market. And as parents and family members mostly prefer those things, ordering and online shopping. So I had to work very hard to prove myself. And once I got down to work, I was also always thinking of introducing something new, so making the products more attractive. So I've seen and I've observed a lot of women in coming up with businesses like this, and especially during the pandemic. And most of them came out on social media, and we had a very nice competition between us. So everyone was very busy making handmade products and gifts and everything. So I'm very, very happy to see that a lot of women are doing their own work and taking leadership in their own initiatives. So this is something that we have to appreciate, because yeah, about 3-4 years back, I have never seen something like this. So this is something that has been very nice, going on a new trend in the Maldives. So according to the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls, they have reported that 84% of home-based workers are women. So that is a very nice number, I think. And those women are actually mothers, and they also run their houses and do everything else plus this. So I think it is very nice what women have come up with in the nation right now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. I think that was an answer to the second part of our question, which was changes due to the rising participation of women in the economic sector. If Dr. Jabin, you have anything to add to either point about the political participation or the economic participation, this would be the time.
I'm generally in agreement with what Member Jihan has noted, and also what Yumna has noted in terms of progress and also regress. I think particularly looking at just one sector, the field of law, we do see that Maldives actually has more female graduates than male graduates. If you look at those university graduating numbers and the university toppers when it comes to law school, you have more women. But when you look at the actual women in service, it's not the same. The picture is quite different. And then again, when we look at women in public service and women in the corporate area of practice, you find that there is a significant distinction again between what women are doing in the sector. I think it's also important to note that while we've made progress in terms of making appointments of female women to the bench, we still have that issue of not assigning certain types of work to women. For example, in the magistrates court, it would be really difficult to assign, for example, even if it's a very small criminal case, to a female judge because of non-acceptance or stereotyping, or of the reluctance that's coming from society to hear a woman even sitting on in a case like that. So we still have those stereotypes and social biases to work with, and I think this is something we really need to work with as a country, and unless we address those issues, we will not be able to effectively bring in the changes that we are currently introducing. So I think just the progress and the regress aspect of those needs to be highlighted in that sense. Thank you.
So the next question we have, thank you for that, is, okay, so women around the world have reported having adapted to their male-dominated work environments by developing special skills and traits, becoming louder, tenacious, more authoritative, and so on. I've done it myself, although probably my family would say I was born bossy. But returning to your individual stories and experiences, I'm curious to know, did you ever find yourself taking on specific characteristics that would ensure your survival or success in a field that was predominantly male?
I will go with myself sitting here in a predominantly male workplace. Actually, I've previously worked in places where my workplaces were predominantly led and conducted by women. So I've never really had to adapt in that sense. And so when I came to the parliament, I got the shock of my life. The misogyny in the institution of what and how people do politics. It's a very gendered view of how to conduct politics or be in politics, in fact. And so the louder you are, the more you call other people names, or there's a very cultured Maldivian cultured specific code of conduct for of being a politician, I guess. So when I came here, I really didn't I found myself totally like a fish out of water. And then I had this conversation with my father and said, so do I really have to adapt or become more like my colleagues to be able to make a significant mark here? Then he had this piece of advice where he said, I think the more you insist on being yourself, the way you are, assert it strongly, perhaps maybe there won't be a need to change, but there will be more people breaking their molds about what a politician is like in the Maldives or in parliament. So the first thing I had to showcase to be able to be accepted in the parliament, I think, was to prove that I can do budgeting, that I understand numbers, that I can look at numbers and say, this is what is missing in the policy, and therefore this is what is missing in the budget. Mm-hmm. And so the more I was given the opportunity to do that, I think there was more acceptance of my place here. Secondly, I think I knowingly and unknowingly did something that was completely uncalled for in the Maldives Parliament, and that was getting pregnant as a sitting parliamentarian. And so, so the standing orders of the Maldives Parliament did not envision a parliamentarian getting pregnant. So therefore, the standing orders did not have anything on maternity leave, on anything on, for instance, during voting time, you cannot go out of the chamber, even if you had to go to the loo. So for a pregnant woman who is also puking all the time, who would need to also go to the bathroom all the time, this standing order, this rule was very difficult. So there's so many molds that had to be broken for this parliament to fit in my pregnancy. And so because of which, I think one thing that became very clear to me was the more female parliamentarians come in, or the more women politicians assume their roles as caretakers, while being caretakers and fulfilling their duty, having to multitask the way we have to, but without compromising on womanhood. I think the greater the acceptance of different kind of politics that is more accepting of women in this role. Yes, so yeah, your question is, the answer to your question is yes, we have to adapt and to sometimes learn new skills to adapt. But also showcase our skills and also showcase ourselves and our lives as women without hiding it a bit more, than to be able to find our place here in a very male-dominated sphere.
I'm sorry, I have to commend you on the grace with which you handled all of that, as well as your answer. If any of the ladies have anything else to add, otherwise we're kind of short on time, so I don't mind going to the next question. Would you have anything to add? So I'll just move on to the next question then. So Unfortunately, women around the world seem to have one particular frustration in common. We're frequently underestimated. I think all three of you have kind of highlighted one or two of those scenarios. I'd like to hear a little bit more about just maybe one example of how you personally have dealt with or continuously deal with discrimination, intimidation, underestimation from different aspects of society, so not just necessarily your work. Yumna or Dr. Jabin, perhaps you would like either of you?
I can add something in there. So I have been working in mostly male dominant environments. So when I was given a job, if I wanted to do something new, they would always be very reluctant. Okay, you can't do this that way. You have to do it the traditional way. So those were the things that really bothered me in the working environment. But I think now, after some time, these things have been changing a lot. And the women leaders and people who have been supervising the projects and everything have become very open to the opinions of women. So I think now we don't face this problem as much as we did before. The people have discriminated me as well, like saying, what have you done with your life and what are you doing? This will not work out. But that was normal things that people would say. So I just gave them a deaf ear and I tried my best to become something else. So I think I've proven them wrong. And today I'm very happy that they are proven wrong. So that's the things that those kind of discrimination still happen here in Maldives and I think in any other place also. So that's the thing I wanted to share.
I'm glad that you've proven them wrong. Dr. Javed, anything to add?
I think resilience would be the biggest skill that I've definitely developed over the years in terms of how I, cope and deal with different situations. And I think in many ways I've been lucky as well because I've been in a profession that's new and old at the same time. It's only in the late, I think, 1970s or 1980s that law was sort of permitted to study in the Maldives for one thing, which meant that many of the lawyers that came or the legal profession itself, the current members, it's quite new. So I had the opportunity to work with and create systems rather than get into an already established system. So in that sense, I would say I was quite lucky as well. But there are certain aspects of the law and justice sector that I find really difficult to work with, and I fear Member Jihan is very right about the parliament. Because when I go to the courts, I get that feeling, even if I sit outside, I get that feeling of, a female lawyer is here, for one thing. How do we cope with this? How do we deal with us? And there's a definitely different way in which the judges deal with female lawyers and, male lawyers that come before him. And this treatment, it might not necessarily be bad, but there is that intimidation, you're not good enough. The louder person is the better lawyer many times. It doesn't matter how good your paper or your presentation is, the louder person, which is usually a man, is the better lawyer. So we do have to face and deal with these things that happen in our society. I think even when working with civil society and working with communities, we are faced with this, and this comes from the society at this point. And I think many times it's women who actually don't see women as good as men, because they sometimes feel like even religion, if it is taught by a male figure, there are more women listening to him than, when it's a female speaking to them. And many times they've even requested that, they get, can we have a male cleric or a male religious scholar to speak on this issue? Because they feel like there'll be more acceptance. There'll be more people listening and, agreeing. And I think that is something that I have definitely experienced and faced it when working with local communities in the Maldives. And I think, yes, the how do I deal with it would be the trying to acquire knowledge and, where do these discriminatory practices come from? And I think my doctoral research, which is actually on women in public life, I have invested a significant portion of it in trying to study whether this is coming from, Islam, whether this is a religious thing that we really have to keep these, roles different and, more clerical, more support roles for women and more leadership roles for men, whether that has to be practiced wherever we are, whether it's the Attorney General's office, the judiciary, the parliament. I really, try to focus on acquiring that knowledge and, where this comes from or whether we've created it ourselves. So I think trying to create that sensitization in our communities is the primary goal for organizations like our civil society organizations at present.
It's a very interesting point. I do agree that I think there's a lot of conditioning that we have to, overcome in terms of, elevating women and accepting the various qualities and various professional expertise of women and things like that as well. Very interesting to hear about your research. I think, though, it might be time for a little bit of a lighter question. So the question is, what is the most rewarding aspect of your work or working in your field? Ms. Yumna, I know you've experienced a lot of joy running your business and it's impacted your life in a very major positive way. Perhaps you could kick off this portion.
Thank you. Yes, of course. I have a business called the Gift Basket Maldives, and it was established in the year 2018. It was just a fun project I developed for a self-therapy because I was going through a very rough time, not being able to sleep at night. So I had a lot of time on my hand and I wanted to do something about it. And I thought of doing some creative work during that time. So I owe my career at the Gift Basket Maldives to insomnia, actually. For the past 20 years, I have lived with insomnia and it was really difficult for me. So I found it in my creativity works best in the quiet hours, free from distractions. I started with simple craft ideas using recycled items, and after a couple of nights, I ended up wanting to make more nice things so badly that they turned into my power-packed nights. During the day when I am a full-time mom, I store the ideas in my head to be worked on at night. So the nights I resented so much turned into the nights I really look forward to. And I wanted to bring joy to people. I was thinking what I could do to make people more happy. Bringing a toy from a shop would be a normal way to gift someone something, but what if the gift the child received was the thing that he really wanted, like the aeroplane he wanted or the star she wanted with their names on it and in their favorite colors. So those are the things that I concentrated on, and I introduced a lot of new things into the market, and people started really giving me very positive feedback. That is when I was really motivated to do more in this. So actually, I used to be really anxious and I wished so badly to sleep at nights. But eventually, I just stopped caring about sleeping because I had something more enjoyable to do. And then now if I can't sleep, I get this peaceful excitement. I know I have time to try something new and something fun in the nights. So after 3 successful years in the business, I was finally contacted by a news agency and they wanted to do an article on me. And I got very scared and it felt so dangerous to come out there with my story. But then I thought, this is who I wanted to be and this is who I am going to be eventually. So I told my story to the audience, and I knew I had no control over my audience. And to my surprise, everyone took it very positively, and everyone started pouring messages like they were very supportive. And I think I am the first person to come up with a story like this, that I have insomnia and I am trying to cope with it. And I have developed something as a self-therapy to cope with my insomnia. So people have actually been taking notes from what I have been doing. And today there's a huge network of people, though they really genuinely pray for my success. That's why I'm saying the women out there, they are all looking forward to something that will keep them engaged in something other than housework or their jobs or their daily routines. So they start doing something at home, and eventually it grows into something that they've never imagined about. So this is how my success story was told to everyone, and I wanted to bring hope to people when I told my story. And I want to tell them it's never too late to try. And people say that I am an inspiration, and alhamdulillah for that. And I learned that hitting rock bottom doesn't mean that I have to stay there. So I have tried to rise up, and I've tried to work out of it. So that is my most rewarding experience in this profession. Thank you.
I think Miss Yumna's story is very unique, but I'm sure MPJ and Dr. Jabin, you also have had rewarding experiences. Is there anything you'd like to share, or should we move to the next one?
I think we can, easily move on to the next one with that inspirational anecdote from life of Miss Yumna. I just want to tell her, while I have this opportunity, that it's so inspiring and such a great example for so many women out there.
Thank you so much.
So if Dr. Jabin, you have nothing to add, I'll move on to the next question. So this is our last question. It's been an incredibly enlightening and wonderful discussion thus far. For our last question, I want to look a little bit at the future and what we can expect, or what we think we can expect from coming generations. I'd like to hear how you encourage young generations to take up space and demand better conditions than what you faced. Ms. Jihan and Dr. Jabin, you both worked in civil society where awareness work always begins, and you're both teachers, mentoring many young female minds, male minds as well. Perhaps you'd like to begin. Once again, the question is, how are you encouraging young generations to take up space and demand better conditions than what you faced?
Right, the one thing I'm constantly aware of, and one thing that I intentionally keep with me, is the fact that at home I'm raising sons. The thing that would make the biggest difference in my personal and professional opinion, and from what I've experienced in this short time here, is the one thing we all need to invest in is raising boys that respect women, raising boys that give that space for their sisters and their daughters and their mothers and their wives to live with integrity and pursue their dreams. And so, that is what I saw at home. And every time I have this overwhelming feeling of what do I want to contribute, or what should I be contributing to, not just as a woman, but as a human being. It's always the awareness that I'm raising boys at home. And so one thing that I consciously try to do is just try and break these gender roles, show by example, or have a lot of discussions at home with, I have a 15-year-old, and now the other one is just a toddler. Just a toddler is just 19 months. But in between, I have a girl of 10 years growing in the house. So it is beyond and above any responsibilities is I'm aware that this responsibility of raising these children away, aware yet away from the perspectives and perceptions that contribute to this divide in our communities, leading to inequality and injustice. Secondly, something I've learned from other female politicians here, senior female politicians in the parliament, something they all do, which I'm very inspired by and which I intend to continue, is they all have girl teams. The campaign teams are girls, predominantly girls. They support a woman or a girl whenever they have the opportunity. They don't miss out. They try and not miss out. They speak about it. So I hear it every day. This is away from the cameras. This is away from the mics. This is just in the tea room or outside in the courtyard. This is just them being themselves. Whenever they have the opportunity, I hear them intentionally investing their time in any woman or girl child that they can. So I've learned that from them, and I'm trying to carry that with them for the future generation. I think what women can do is to carry other women with you as you go along, and so to support other girls. Whenever I have the opportunity to go back to my constituency, I remind myself, I have these I journal, so I have this repeatedly written in my journals where I tell myself that I write and tell myself that I represent the rural, but I also represent the rural women. So it's a different, a totally different life out there. And so consciously making the effort to take along as many girls as, along with me whenever I have the opportunity is I think what I can do best at this opportunity that I've been really truly privileged with.
I couldn't agree more, especially on both the points that women need to carry other women and that raising boys who respect women is pivotal. I couldn't agree more. Ladies, if you would like to add something, that's Dr. Jabin has.
Yeah, I would just like to add to what Mama Jihan just mentioned about, carrying or taking other women with you. And I think that's quite a challenging task as well, because everyone is so busy and, senior women, if I'm looking at the legal profession for senior female lawyers, they already have such a challenging career and they have their personal lives as well. And we constantly hear this from the younger generation that you don't get enough mentoring and we really don't know what to do. And I think there's also a big difference between when we grew up and when the younger generations are growing up. They come up with this thing in their mind that everything is going to be equal and there's going to be no discrimination. We are going to have everything that we were promised in law school, human rights is here. But then they find that, the working sector is quite not like that. And for corporate fields such as law, a women's experience is quite different as well, because if you can't keep up, then you really at some point are letting go of the entire training that you've studied for your entire life. So I think that in itself is a challenge, but we have got to create spaces through which the generational gap can be matched and more women can carry, women with them. And I think for, people who've been teachers, they do mentor, the younger, both men and women when they are at law school, but, they need to be continuously in this process, I suppose, throughout their life. And, you will always need a mentor in life. And, we still need mentoring. So I think that sort of support system needs to be in place in our context as well.
Definitely, wonderful point. Siumna, would you like to add anything before we wrap up?
No.
Yeah, I think your previous answer said it all, didn't it? So thank you again. That was a wonderful discussion. A very big thank you to Women in Democracy and to the Frederick Roman Foundation for organizing this fabulous digital event and for inviting us all to be a part of it. Thanks again to our brilliant keynote speaker as well and our panelists. We're not completely done yet. But I just wanted to say that it's been a big pleasure and an honor to speak with you ladies and stay with you. So now we're ready to receive any relevant questions from the audience. Please raise your hand if you have questions. We've already received a few. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go about it as with as much time as we can. I'll start with the questions that are as separate as possible from what we've already discussed. So I have one question from Dr. Karsten Klein. He asks, how would you assess the factor diversity in the daily life of women in the country? For example, women of higher age, women with disabilities, from other minorities or vulnerable groups. If any of you ladies would like to take this question.
Could you repeat the question, Rai?
The question is, how would you assess the factor of diversity in the daily life of women in the country? So women of higher age with disabilities, from other vulnerable groups.
Dr. Jabin, Yumna, if you're not if you don't have like a pressing response, maybe I'll attempt, and maybe you girls can help me out here. It's from the reports that we have, the UN reports that have been conducted here, the civil society reports, the Human Rights Commission's Right Side of Life report, and reports, and so many other evidences existing in our system. It is very clear that the life experiences of the vulnerable groups vary by several factors with that of the others. Like, for instance, women with disabilities, women with the elderly women, women in female migrant workers, women, the girl child. This group of vulnerability, these people with the vulnerabilities experience double burden of that of gender and also of their situation here in the country. We don't, whenever we think of, unfortunately, legislating or even policing, as in making policies for vulnerable groups, it's difficult to bring into perspective the very unique life experiences of female vulnerable groups. And so because of lack of women in decision-making tables, because of lack of women in decision-making positions, we've often we've not often legislated well for women, vulnerable women, female groups. And we've not made policies catering to the needs of women who are vulnerable. For instance, even if you look at something as simple as schooling, how schooling becomes challenging after a certain point in time for a woman with a disability who wants to study further, who has to go to work, who will have children of her own at one point in time. We've not factored in how doubly hard it is, or how life circumstances are different for them in our policies, in our laws, in our programs. So even in economic empowerment programs that we roll out, it's really, these programs look, unfortunately, take into account a very half-baked view of life of women. And so they don't, cater to. For instance, many of the economic programs don't really factor in the issue that many women with disabilities don't have a bank account. Many women with disabilities don't know how to access an ATM, therefore don't have the access to their own debit card for that matter. And so to empower themselves, it's doubly hard than just than another woman who is not crippled by the life circumstances of a person with a disability. Similarly, same situation for domestic migrant workers here, female migrant workers, similar situation for women with the girl child. And so here, similar to many other countries and what we hear from other places as well, we are lacking in legislating enough, making policies correctly and adequately, and also programming and reaching out to the most vulnerable women's groups. We are lacking in our efforts towards that. This requires another different perspective of thinking, and I think for that, again, we need their representation of women with disabilities, representation of women, of the girl child, her participation, her voice, and the elderly, especially the elderly women. From the moment they become widows, it's an entirely different life for them, and we don't factor in their voices in our policing, in our decision making and legislation and programming. And so it's definitely a gap. If you want to add, please go ahead.
I think just one thing, in the Maldives, we don't necessarily say, we have an issue of race or ethnicity. But at the same time, I think it's really important that we realize that not all women in the Maldives, across the Maldives, have the same life experiences. So I think that goes on to, show the importance of what Member Jihan just mentioned as well. Women from North, what are their experiences? Women from the South, women from the central regions, their experiences needs to come to the table. And the only way that can happen is through representation. And we don't have them at the table at this point. So I think, apart from women with disabilities or other types of vulnerabilities, it's also important to consider rural women and where they're from in the Maldives, and to have inclusive representation in that sense. Thank you, Rai.
I think both of you did really well on that question. I have another one. There are two questions that are very similar, so I'm just going to kind of mesh them up and mention names. So I have one question from Amnat Nashwak from Maldives, who asked, how would you improve women's education and skills for uneducated people? Or how do you think it should be, approached? And Shima Haider from Pakistan wants to know more about the role of women to achieve SDG 4, which is the educational goals. So, Dr. Jabin, maybe this might be your forte.
I think this is something that we speak of as a major achievement in the Maldives. We've achieved gender parity in education. We've achieved gender parity in, primary, secondary, and many times, even if you look at university education, we find that we have the number of women currently, are higher than men in the Maldives. So I think in terms of parity, we've achieved that. So that question, I suppose we should really take from a different perspective in terms of what happens afterwards, or where do these women go afterwards. In terms of school enrollment, I think if my numbers are correct, we are on a gender parity at that as well. So we don't really have an issue of men versus women in terms of enrollment and going through education, but we definitely have in terms of attending to vulnerabilities, and like Member Jihan mentioned, women with a disability, schooling, and then continuing in education and possibly moving on to a job afterwards. If I am getting that question correctly, right, please do correct me.
Sorry, I think you have address the question. As you said, this is an area where we are, at least on the surface level, functioning quite well. There's another question that I think is a good lead-in from this one is Hasna Wisham from Maldives asks why currently still in the Maldives, very few women, given especially the fact that we have all of this parity and all of this achievement in academic areas, that very few females are in high leadership or high management level jobs.
Okay, I'll try to answer this one because we recently finished a parliamentary inquiry on gaps in gender equality in the Maldives. So we looked at laws, we looked at regulations, we looked at government programs and government policies, and we tried to analyze where the gaps are in gender equality. And one of the things that very clearly came up from this inquiry, and which other studies also support, other studies done in this area, also support is the fact that despite women in the Maldives being actually more women have attained tertiary levels of education than men in Maldives, where they if you look at civil service, just the civil service commission, civil service alone, civil servants alone, you'll see that there are more female civil servants, but actually they're in clerical or low-paying jobs. So it's actually the men who are in the decision-making level, so higher-paying jobs. So we asked, so what is happening here in between? So the very clear answer that is visible is at one point, once a woman starts a family, she has to make a choice between her career, her work, or the amount she can invest in work versus her family. So she is forced to take unfair load of caretaking roles at one point in time, where she must compromise at the end of the day on her career and also on her aspirations a lot of times. And so this renders oftentimes a gap in their public service or civil service, or even in the private or corporate sector. Earlier, during the earlier days, our families were joint families. So because we were living with many members of the family, there was compared to the situation now, there was some sort of support on raising children in bigger families when you were living with your mothers, your grandmothers, your aunts. But now it's even harder than it was before because the Maldivian, especially in Malé, Greater Malé area, and also slowly in the atolls as well, people are starting to live in a nuclear setting. And so, which means it's either the husband or the wife who has to assume the role of a caretaker at a point in time when the other person is working. And so oftentimes it is the woman that is taking this role and compromising on the on her career and on her aspirations. And this is where the gap comes. And so when the woman is finally able to return to work after the initial years of taking care of children, she has lost that opportunity to, she has a longer way to walk towards the decision-making table. And so there's a delay. So this is the main reason why which is clearly evident in the civil service. It's far worse in the private sector, actually, where there are so many discriminations, where we don't have the application of the employment law is not well monitored in the private sector, and therefore, as a result, whatever rights and privileges and whatever facilities are provided for in the employment law is not properly applied. In fact, it's not applied at all in some private settings and in small businesses. And so as a result, for women, it is shocking to note that the informal business sector, in the informal business sector, it's 44% is women, actually. but most of them are not registered. They don't have legit documents. They don't have formal recognition as a business, and therefore the fact that she's working. So there's a person who is working to earn for the family. She's earning, but there's no formal recognition of that. And she's also investing her time in caretaking roles. And not to mention, often these families are taking care of their mother, father, or also grandparents, and women assume that role as well. So as a result, this hindrance, this structural hindrance in women to sustain their employments or their career or other personal aspirations suffer. So this is the gap we need to fill is right here. And for that, daycare facilities or other but before daycare facilities, I think we need to work on changing the mindset of sharing household care responsibilities. The moment families start contributing, I think we will see a huge difference, and also some structural assistance to families that need support to work for the man and the woman to work together needs to be ascertained.
That was such a thorough answer, so much so that I just wanted to add to it as well. It's not my role, but I wanted to add to it as well. You know, I worked in the private sector for a long time, and when I was a managing editor, I was very much a minority in that role. And just to add to your point, I think there's also a hesitation when it comes to hiring women of a certain age and hiring women who are likely, or even promoting women who are likely to, you know, according to the perception of the men at the table, who might get married, who might start a family, and who might therefore compromise on business time and things like that. Yeah, so 100% I agree. I've lived the example. Anything any of you ladies would like to add to that?
Can I add? I've gone through that in my life, because after I had my kids, I wanted to work again. So I actually applied to a job. But I think the gap between my when my kids growing up after 8 years of applying to the job and everything, I think they really didn't have any guarantee that I will be able to perform on the job. Even after having so much experience and my educational qualifications, I was rejected. So I think I'm making a point about what Rai just said, and Jihan also. So that is really something that's really happening in this society. And I think we have to break that somehow, for the women to start working again, even if they become mothers, or even if they are family, they stay at home taking care of their families. If they want to be back in the job market, they should have some opportunities. That's what I think would be a very good thing for the women.
I just wanted to, if we have time, just wanted to quickly add something. I will just take 1 minute. So even worse, the situation is even worse when you are on the job and then you get pregnant, huh? So then you have this responsibility, especially if you're a public figure. You and I felt like I needed to go to work, even if I am not well. I needed to go to work, because if I don't go to work today, then forever women will be judged in the women who get pregnant while they're performing their job, especially in a public office, will be judged and discriminated forever. So knowing that there were two things that I had to do. One was that not to give up on the traveling. If you're well, if you're healthy, and with the doctor's certificate and approval, the first thing they ask you is, when you get pregnant, when you're a woman and you're working, they ask you whether, how are you going to travel? How are you going to go to your constituency? How are you going to perform your job? But the more visible you are performing your job the way you have been always, it is an added burden on the woman. Secondly, I consciously had to maintain a 100% attendance in the parliament, just to during my pregnancy, just to showcase that, pregnancy is not an illness. It's a debilitating factor for women in public offices, and for women as well as to showcase to men who are legislating that they need to legislate for this very real life circumstance of the woman as well. And it is not a point in time that you can discard a woman from her, career or personal aspirations. So it's so difficult, not just before you have after you have a kid, but while you're about to have one as well. The structural and legislative and policy and perspective challenges affect women from surviving their careers.
I think if we are looking at the law and justice sector, it's also important to note that, women don't pursue certain roles because it is undesired. Undesired by their families, undesired, for their partners, for the communities that they are from. And, a very good example is being a magistrate in an island. Many magistrates, female magistrates, have shared the experience where they have to attend meetings and they are seated at the back because it's a single woman attending the meeting and all the men occupy the seats in front. Whereas a magistrate's position is one of the highest positions that they can be in an island. They're treated differently because they're women, and they are shown, in person in a physical attending meeting that it's not desirable for a woman to take on this role within a society. So for law and justice sector positions, I think even though when there are vacancies, women actually hesitate to take on these roles. Many of my female colleagues who've applied to become judges and magistrates, they've been called up by religious scholars who've spoken to them and said it's not recommended in Islam or allowed in Islam to become a judge. So you should not be pursuing this. If you've really studied and if you are intelligent woman, you will not be seeking these positions. So I think for those reasons as well, within my sector, women actually shy away from these positions. And these are women who, not necessarily have that additional family roles. They want these roles, but they still have to shy away from these positions.
That's a very good point. Ladies, I think we've kind of run out of time for questions, if I'm not mistaken. I thought I'd use, I think we have three or 4 minutes left. I thought I'd use this time to let you ladies say, a final note, if you will. If you like to, you can smile and pass it on. That's fine too. Start with Ms. Yamna.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that women are now more aware of issues and can contribute effectively towards resolution. They bring value to the table. The aim should be for more corporate environment where everybody is equal, men or women. The aim of recruitment strategies should be to engage with all women and base appointments on talent and skills set rather than gender, so as to access larger diverse pie of expertise. True change will come when women do not need to be better than men, but just as good. So this may look impossible in the current scenario, but to achieve this impossible, all this is needed is a drive. So this is actually a very good message. One of my relatives have given me. So I really appreciate her support in trying to grow me into this session. So I just wanted to pass on a message that we have discussed together. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Dr. Jabin. And Hijihan, would you like to add anything to wrap up?
I think just in closing, I would like to say we have made so much good progress in the Maldives when it comes to women's rights and also, the position we were in, 30 years ago and then 30 years from then today. We have made so much improvement in terms of progress. I think we have a fair bit to go still, and I think we are on the right path. And we continue to work together, all of us, and I think we are going to ensure that the laws and programs that we have created are getting implemented in the Maldives as well. I would like to thank FNF South Asia and also Women in Democracy to have given this opportunity to me and to have a conversation with all of the panelists and with you, Rai, today here. Thank you.
I really don't want to add anything after what Jabin has said. It's perfect. It's a perfect ending, but since I must, I will, and I will try not to ruin it. I completely, first of all, I'll begin with saying I completely agree with what Dr. Jabin has said. We've come a long way, and one thing we cannot afford to do is to give up on the discourse. It might seem repetitive, it might seem exhausting, it might seem like we're not getting anywhere on most days, but the moment we give up on the discourse, I think we lose the fight. And so to keep up the fight, we must carry on discussions and discourses and exchanges like this one. So for which I thank Women Democracy and FNF South Asia for conducting this one and for having me here. But I also think one thing that we don't do enough anywhere in any forum, not just the Maldives, elsewhere, is we don't allow men to champion the fight for equal rights as much as we should be showcasing the good men out there who really are breaking the trends and who have been a pillar of support for so many women who've been able to make changes in their societies. So while we, I think I always flourish in an all-girl discussion. I feel more of myself, but at the same time, I think it's really important to have to give space for men who have been championing women's rights as well. Very few out there, but I think it's very important for us to showcase that as well. It will be a huge source of inspiration and encouragement for not just the men, but especially for the girl children. On this note, I would like to thank everyone who've listened and who've given us this time, and Rai for conducting us so fairly and so lovely. Thank you so much.
I would like to say thank you to Women and Democracy and FNF for this opportunity. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm so happy that there's MB Jihan, Jabin, and Dr. Jabin and Rai to assist me in here. Thank you so much for this lovely session and for everyone listening everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, as well. It's been a very uplifting and wonderful discussion. Just hearing speak has given me a lot of joy. So thank you very much. Before I take any more time, I just want to introduce everyone to the last part of the webinar, which is a few words from Dr. Carsten Klein, the head of FNF in South Asia. Dr. Carsten Klein's professional career has always had an international dimension to it. He started working with the German Armed Forces, later joining the Foreign and Security Policy section of the parliamentary group of the Free Democratic Party in the German parliament in Berlin, followed by managing the FDP parliamentary groups in 2 state assemblies. He was also managing the department responsible for international business of the Federal Employment Agency and the Central Placement Office for Foreigners Specialists. Currently, he's based in New Delhi with his family, where he works with the Frederick Naumann Foundation for Freedom to advance common liberal ideas, visions, and concrete projects in one of the most dynamic regions of the world. Over to you, Dr. Klein.
Thank you very, very much. It was a great honor and really a great opportunity to listen to all of you. Thanks to Honorable Member of Parliament, Jain Mahmoud, thanks to Mrs. Mariam Labin and Mrs. Yumna Rashid, and our moderator, Ms. Raya Munawar. Thank you very much for this very detailed and elaborate comments on assessment on this very, very important issue. Friedrich Naumann Foundation will definitely continue with this series on Maldives and topics of women, not only in South Asia, but also in other global areas and circumstances. Anyway, the recent reforms in the Maldives for Maldivian women, notably the gender equality action plan that includes measures such as increasing the number of women in leadership positions, like in local governments, by 40% by 2025, and also in other sectors, clearly shows that the role of women in Maldivian society is crucial and vital. But as this discussion also has clearly shown, implementation of that is extremely important. So again, the 3 R's in women policies, if we may so say so, remain important, namely right. So that means the legal framework of your work, of your positions, representations, as you rightly said, and which I could, from my personal background in the parliamentarian work, also could say is extremely needed and very important, as well as the 3rd R, resources, namely money, people, services, which could contribute to a good development of the topic in our societies. I would, if you allow, also shed a light on the women empowerment work of Friedrich Naumann Foundation, not only in South Asia. Friedrich Naumann Foundation has always globally been a strong supporter of universal human rights, and we see it as one of the next and upcoming milestones of this work, that for the next years we promised to have 50% of female experts, speakers, authors, trainers, and so on in all of our activities and all of our events. And I think that is really a good landmark, because I think we really need landmarks to pursue our aims. And let me also underline that we have recently launched the initiative Female Forward campaign, where we raise awareness around different topics, and especially around the topic of female entrepreneurship. We try to foster especially women who want to establish their own businesses by very concrete measures. And we also try to enhance the possibility, for example, for the digital presence of their companies. With that, I would like to say that we have got with CCS an excellent partner, where we, especially in the field of training teachers in digital, but also in minority and also in female related issues, have a great partner. So thank you very much, Mrs. Goyal, for your personal commitment and your team's commitment. Also, my thanks goes, of course, very much to Women and Democracy. Thank you for the lovely cooperation. Thank you very much for your support. I hope not only in this very particular event which we had today, but also in further events also. Thank you and also to our Friedrich Naumann Foundation teams in North Rhine-Westphalia for making that possible, because as you know, this is really an opportunity to showcase reality from this great nation, Maldives, also to a German and a European audience. Thank you very much to Mrs. Müller and the whole team from North Rhine-Westphalia office. Thank you, Mr. Schlesinger, for your help and great support from Universum. Not to forget our dear colleagues from B department, the national department, especially Yannick Meffert, for your opening remarks. Again, thank you very much to our colleagues from the regional office, South Asia, especially Nupur Hasija, really the motor behind of most of our activities, Mrs. Manjari Mishra and Mr. Tenzing Paldra for the personal commitment. And I wanted again say thank you very much to our listeners today. Please also check on our social media channels. I definitely promise that there will be a lot of also other interesting perspectives regarding life in and from outside South Asia. Again, thanks to our panelists, and let me really say from the bottom of my heart, it might not be every day very, very easy for you, also not in all the countries where you work in. Thank you very much for your personal commitment, very much also for your personal energy. I think it made this discussion made it very, very clear that you also, from really all the energy, the conviction you have, all the personal values you have, you work for this very relevant topic every day. So thank you very much, also from a personal point of view, for this excellent commitment. Let me only underline that 9 months ago, we had a webinar on Maldivian tourism with, for example, Honorable Minister of Tourism, an Honorable Member of Parliament, and the Director of the Maldivian Tourist Authority. That was reflected by more than 16,000 people, so we got also a lot of comments. And I'm deeply convinced that this today's discussion round also will have a lot of participants, of people who see this excellent discussion also on social media channels. So thank you very much again to all of you. We will continue this series, definitely. And I wish you for the remaining day and for the next month and years, happiness, and especially in these days, a very good health. Stay safe and thanks, and have a good day from New Delhi.